The Candle in the Wrong Window. Welcome to Cotswold Cozy Mysteries. I'm Clara Whitfield. December has come to Carsely, bringing frosted lanes, glowing cottage windows, and the dangerous village belief that charity prevents people from judging one another. This year's attraction is a living Advent windows trail. Each evening, another household will unveil a seasonal display for charity. It ought to be charming, but in Carsely, a candle in the window may mean welcome, judgment, or that someone has been looking in rather too closely. And when one outsider begins deciding whose Christmas taste is tasteful and whose is merely vulgar, Agatha Raisin discovers that goodwill can have surprisingly sharp elbows. Would you trust a village event simply because it was organised for charity? Chapter 1. Honest Light. Agatha Raisin had donated £75 to Carsley's Living Advent Windows Appeal and considered herself entitled to a respectable date on the rota. Apparently she was mistaken. The vicarage sitting-room smelled of tea, damp coats and pine greenery. Boxes of candles covered Reverend Bloxby's table while Nora Pargett, organiser of the trail, stood with a clipboard and the expression of a woman who believed Christmas could be improved by administration. At the centre of everything was Clement Frost. Clement, a community arts organiser from Evesham, had silver-flecked hair, a dark green scarf and a soothing manner that Agatha had disliked almost immediately. He had listened politely while she described her proposed window. Silver branches, deep red velvet, glass stars, candles and artificial snow. "It sounds wonderfully enthusiastic," he said. Agatha heard the insult at once. "I thought people might appreciate something with impact." "Of course, though we're trying to avoid anything too theatrical." Sir Charles Frayth, standing near the fireplace, suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. Agatha glared at him. "What? Nothing. You're smirking." "My face is unfortunate." "That's true." Across the room sat Verity Shaw, the attractive newcomer at Willow Cottage. Her display, she explained, would consist of greenery, dried oranges and white candles. Just simple things. Agatha distrusted women who said simple about arrangements that had clearly required 3 shopping trips and professional scissors. Clement beamed at Verity. "Exactly. Quiet, natural, almost devotional." Then Nora consulted her clipboard. "Verity will take the 23rd. Agatha looked up sharply. "I asked for the 23rd. "You expressed a preference," Nora said. "I expressly expressed one. We did take it into consideration." That sentence alone nearly justified violence. "And what date have I got?" "The 17th. "A lovely date," Mrs. Bloxby said gently. Agatha loved Mrs. Bloxby, but there were moments when kindness was deeply inconvenient. "I couldn't care less," Agatha announced. Nobody had suggested she did. Verity gave her an apologetic smile. "I'd be happy to swap if it matters terribly." "It doesn't matter terribly." "Of course." Charles coughed into his hand. Nora hurried on with the meeting. Reverend Bloxby worried about curtains catching fire. Caleb Reed, the retired electrician, said half the village seemed determined to burn itself down for atmosphere. Maureen Vale suggested battery candles. Clement looked horrified. "Real flame has warmth." He lifted a short beeswax candle from the vicarage supply box. It had already been burned, and its wick contained a distinctive twist of red thread. "This is what I mean, imperfect wax. Honest light." His eyes flicked towards Agatha. She narrowed hers. "Are my candles dishonest?" Clement laughed. "My dear Mrs. Raisin." "Agatha. Agatha. I'm speaking aesthetically." Mrs. Bloxby took the candle from him. "What an unusual wick." "Hand-twisted," Clement said. "Made by a little supplier outside Broadway. Quite distinctive." Nora tapped her clipboard. Agatha noticed the nervous little movement. The meeting continued. Dennis Crowther wandered about photographing decorations until Clement curtly asked him not to photograph his notebook. Piers Lovell, the local lifestyle blogger, watched Clement more closely than he watched the candles. Livia Crane sat quietly in an old camel coat, and Verity continued receiving compliments for simplicity. When the meeting finally ended, Clement caught Agatha near the door. "I hope I haven't offended you." "Of course not." It was the Carsely answer, meaning precisely the opposite. "I simply want every window to reveal something genuine about the household," he said. Agatha buttoned her coat. People normally choose what they reveal. Clement smiled. They think they do. Something in the answer made her look at him properly. Across the room, Nora gathered her papers. Dennis checked his camera. Livia slipped on her gloves. Clement lowered his voice. Windows are interesting things. People arrange them beautifully and forget what can be seen behind the display. Then he walked away. Outside, dusk had settled over Carsely. Warm squares of light glowed behind cottage panes, and frost was beginning to whiten the hedges. Agatha marched home nursing 2 injuries, the 17th of December, and the phrase too theatrical. By the time she reached her cottage, she had decided that her Advent window would be magnificent. If Clement Frost wanted restraint, he could admire it somewhere else. Chapter 2, Artificial Snow. Agatha spent most of Saturday proving that restraint was overrated. Her front room disappeared beneath silver branches, red ribbon, boxes of glass stars, and 3 different kinds of artificial snow. One had looked like soap flakes, another had looked like insulation. The third, purchased at considerable expense in Cheltenham, possessed what the shop assistant had called a natural crystalline finish. Agatha thought snow ought to look like snow. By 4 o'clock her window looked splendid. By 4:30 it had begun to sag. The problem was heat. Agatha had placed too many candles too close to the velvet backdrop. The room was not actually in danger of catching fire, but the warmth softened the adhesive holding several silver stars in place. One detached itself and landed in the artificial snow. Then another followed. Damn! Agatha reached behind the display. A branch shifted. Half a drift of expensive crystalline snow slid from the sill. The doorbell rang. Not now. It rang again. Agatha opened the door to find Sir Charles Frayth smiling beneath a dark overcoat. "I thought I'd inspect the great artistic statement. You can inspect it from outside. I brought whiskey. You may come in." Carsely's first Advent window walk had already begun. Families moved slowly along the lane in scarves and woolen hats, carrying printed maps of the route. Children pressed noses against windows. Adults pretended they were interested only in the charity aspect. Charles studied Agatha's display. "It's very you. What does that mean?" "I'm searching for something survivable." The central arrangement chose that moment to droop. A silver branch leaned sideways. Agatha lunged for it. The branch struck a pile of artificial snow, which cascaded through the partly open window and landed across Charles's shoulder and hair. He stood perfectly still. Agatha stared. Charles brushed white flakes from his lapel. "Well," he said, "now it's interactive." Agatha began laughing despite herself. That was when Clement Frost appeared outside. He was accompanied by Nora Pargett, Dennis Crowther, and Piers Lovell. Behind them came several villagers who immediately became extremely interested in Agatha's decorations. Clement surveyed the leaning branches, the velvet, the glitter, and Charles's snow-covered coat. His smile appeared. Memorable. Agatha stopped laughing. People seemed to like it. "Oh, certainly." There were few words more poisonous than certainly. Dennis lifted his camera. Charles struck a solemn pose beside the collapsed snowbank. "Don't you dare," said Agatha. Dennis took the photograph. Piers Lovell was already tapping at his phone. "What are you writing?" Agatha demanded. "Nothing unkind." "That wasn't what I asked." Piers smiled. "Just a little colour for the village page." Agatha looked towards Clement. He was writing in a small black notebook. "What are you putting down?" "Observations." "About my window?" "About the trail." "Let me see." He closed the notebook. Creative notes are terribly dull out of context. Agatha disliked that answer almost as much as she disliked the man. The group moved on. Charles stayed behind long enough to remove snow from his collar. "You've frightened him," he said. "Nonsense." He closed the notebook. "Because he's writing something nasty." "Then steal it." Agatha looked at him. Charles grinned. That was a joke. Pity. Later, after correcting the worst of the damage, Agatha joined the trail. Carsely looked annoyingly beautiful. Candlelight glowed behind small cottage panes. Holly wreaths hung from old doors, frost silvered the low stone walls, and the church tower rose dark above the roofs. Most displays were modest. One contained a wooden stable and 3 candles. Another used winter branches gathered from the garden. Agatha found them perfectly pleasant and resented them for it. Then she reached Willow Cottage. Verity Shaw's window was surrounded by greenery. Dried orange slices hung from thin ribbon. White candles stood at varying heights among sprigs of ivy and rosemary. It appeared effortless. Agatha knew effort when she saw it. Verity stood outside accepting compliments. "You've such an eye," Nora told her. "Oh, no, it's really nothing." "Exactly," said Clement. "That is why it works." Agatha heard him. Charles beside her heard him too. "Don't," he murmured. "I wasn't going to say anything. Your nostrils suggest otherwise." Piers approached Clement near the gate. Agatha moved closer under the respectable excuse of examining a basket of greenery. Clement had opened his notebook again. "You could get something rather good out of all this," Piers said. "I already have." "For the charity?" Clement gave a quiet laugh. "For myself." Piers raised his eyebrows. Clement looked back towards the glowing cottages. "Carsely is turning into a rather wonderful study in spiritual vanity." Piers laughed too eagerly. Agatha felt a small tightening of interest. So Clement's notes were not merely about decoration. At Willow Cottage, Verity reached through the open doorway to adjust something inside her display. For a second the greenery shifted. Agatha saw the brass candle tray beneath it. Among the white candles lay one short beeswax stub. Its wick was twisted with red, the same kind Clement had held at the vicarage. Verity noticed Agatha looking. She moved the greenery back over it. Then she smiled. "Lovely evening, isn't it?" "Charming," said Agatha. And for once she meant neither the weather nor the window. Chapter 3. Who Looks Through Glass? By 9 o'clock the Red Lion was full of damp coats, mulled wine, and the smug satisfaction of people who had successfully admired one another in public. Agatha sat near the fire with Charles and Mrs. Bloxby, and watched Carsely pretend the Advent trail was not a competition. Verity's window had been declared so natural 6 times. Agatha had counted. "It was very pretty," said Mrs. Bloxby. "Yes, and yours was certainly striking." Agatha looked at her. Mrs. Bloxby smiled into her drink. Across the room, Nora Pargett stood beside the donation tin, receiving compliments as though she had personally invented December. Clement Frost moved easily between groups. He praised displays, remembered names, and somehow left each conversation with more information than he had brought to it. Agatha watched him join Livia Crane. "Your window is tomorrow, isn't it?" he asked. Livia smiled. "Very modest, I'm afraid. Modesty can be revealing." Her smile faded slightly. Clement lowered his voice. "I passed the old pump-house this afternoon. Fascinating little building." Livia's hand tightened around one glove. "Only for a moment." Then she said brightly, "Your scarf is a lovely colour." Agatha noticed. Clement moved on. Dennis Crowther was showing photographs on the screen of his camera. "You caught my collapse, I suppose," Agatha said. "Only the aftermath. Delete it." Dennis laughed. She did not. His thumb moved across the controls rather quickly. One photograph disappeared. Agatha leaned closer. What was that? Nothing useful. What was in it? Blurred window. Whose? Dennis shoved the camera into its case. "Honestly, Agatha, you're worse than the police." "Not yet." At the bar, Piers Lovell had cornered Clement. "Still writing your little village masterpiece?" Clement smiled. "I may have enough already." "For what?" "A piece about what people reveal when they think they're displaying virtue." Piers's expression sharpened. "That sounds rather cruel. Only if they recognise themselves." Nearby, Nora stopped tapping her clipboard. Agatha noticed that too. Clement had managed something remarkable. In less than a week he had made half the village afraid of being described accurately. Verity arrived carrying a tray of mince pies. The room warmed towards her at once. Agatha hated herself slightly for noticing. "Homemade?" Charles asked. Verity laughed. "Good heavens, no. I know my limits." Agatha liked her better for exactly 3 seconds. Then Clement said, "That honesty is why your window works." The 3 seconds ended. Verity set down the tray. "You do make everything sound like a moral test." "Perhaps it is." "Oh, don't," said Maureen Vale from the end of the table. It's greenery and candles. Clement smiled. My dear Maureen, symbolism is everywhere. So are fire regulations. Caleb Reed grunted approval into his beer. Clement turned to him. I'm told you've been interfering with several displays. Stopping curtains, catching fire. Some householders feel you've spoiled the effect. Some householders are idiots. That earned the first genuinely warm laugh of the evening. Even Agatha joined in. Clement did not. Instead, he said, One must be careful what one ruins in the name of improvement. Caleb's face hardened. And one must be careful what one lights. For a moment the room quietened. Then Mrs. Blocksby asked whether anyone wanted another mince pie, and Carsely gratefully returned to safer hostilities. Later, Agatha found Clement standing alone near the rear window. Outside, frost had whitened the pub yard. You've upset rather a lot of people, she said. Have I? You know perfectly well you have. He looked amused. People dislike being observed. You're not observing. You're collecting. That made him look at her properly. You understand the distinction. I worked in public relations. Then you know everyone edits themselves. Agatha folded her arms. And you think you're clever enough to see the unedited version? Sometimes. He took a sip of wine. I found one window tonight that tells the truth entirely by accident. Agatha waited. He smiled. She waited longer. He enjoyed that too much. Whose? That would spoil it. Across the room a chair scraped. Livia had dropped her glove. Dennis immediately looked down at his camera. Nora's fingers tightened around the clipboard. Even Piers had stopped pretending not to listen. Clement glanced towards them all. Agatha understood then that he wanted them nervous. Not merely because he enjoyed secrets. Because frightened people revealed more. He walked away before she could press him. Charles appeared at her elbow. You look murderous. I'm thinking. Same face. Agatha ignored him. At the far side of the room, Verity was rearranging greenery around the little decorative tray she had brought from home. For just a second the leaves shifted. Agatha saw the short beeswax candle again. Red, twisted wick. Verity immediately covered it. This time she also looked around to see whether anyone had noticed. Their eyes met. Verity smiled. Agatha smiled back. Neither smile contained much Christmas spirit. When Agatha finally stepped outside, Carsely was quiet beneath the frost. Windows glowed along the lane, small and golden against the dark. For the first time that evening, she stopped thinking about her own display. Clement Frost had called one window truthful by accident. Agatha suspected several people in Carsely were already wondering whether he meant theirs. Chapter 4. The Pump House Door. The following evening was colder. By 8:30, Carsley's lanes had acquired a brittle shine, and every hedge seemed edged with frost. The Advent walk had finished at the vicarage window, where Reverend Blocksby had sensibly insisted on electric lights among the curtains. Agatha had spent most of the evening pretending not to watch Verity. This had been difficult because Verity had spent most of the evening being admired. Clement Frost, meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen. He said he'd meet us at the Red Lion for the closing toast, Nora said, checking her watch. He also said he wanted to look at one last display. Piers replied. Which one? Piers shrugged. Agatha noticed the hesitation. You know something. I know lots of things, usually 5 minutes after everyone else. Charles handed Agatha a glass of mulled wine. Tri-seasonal peace. I dislike it. They waited another 10 minutes, then 20. By 9 even Nora's efficiency had begun to crack. Mrs. Blocksby approached quietly. Alf says Clement mentioned the old pump-house earlier. Livia Crane, standing nearby, went very still. Agatha looked at her. The pump-house? Livia gave a small laugh. There's nothing there. Then why would Clement go? I've no idea. Bill Wong arrived before anyone reached an answer. The call had come from Caleb Reed, who had gone to check a reported fault in one of the outdoor lights near the churchyard wall, and had found Clement near the old pump-house. By the time Agatha reached the lane, Bill had already established a boundary around the scene. He looked at her. No, I haven't said anything. You were about to. That's prejudice. That's experience. The old pump-house stood beyond a narrow path beside the churchyard wall, half hidden by bare elder branches. It was a squat stone building with a weathered wooden door and a small high window. A police light threw pale shapes across the frost. Clement Frost lay beyond the path, partly obscured by the angle of the wall. Agatha looked once and then away. There was no need to look twice. Charles, unusually quiet, moved closer to her. Bill joined them a few minutes later. "We're treating it as suspicious until we know otherwise." "What happened?" Agatha asked. "Possible fall?" "Possibly not." "From where?" Bill ignored that. "Who knew he was coming here?" Nobody answered immediately. That interested Agatha more than an answer would have done. Nora finally said, "He mentioned something about a private inspection." "To whom?" "I don't remember." Pierce said he talked about a surprise. Dennis Crowther shifted his camera bag. Livia folded her arms tightly. Bill noticed all of them, noticing one another. "That's useful," he said. "A man announces a secret and apparently tells half the village." Caleb Reed stood near the wall in a heavy coat, looking furious rather than frightened. "He shouldn't have been here with a flame," he said. Agatha turned. "What flame?" Caleb pointed towards the pump-house door. On the ground just outside it lay a short beeswax candle stub. Even at a distance, Agatha recognized the darkened wick, threaded with red. The same kind Clement had held at the vicarage. The same kind she had seen in Verity's window. Bill crouched beside it without touching it. "Interesting." "It's from Verity's display," Agatha said. Bill looked up. "Is it? I saw one exactly like it." "Exactly." "Beeswax, red twisted wick. That makes it similar." "Don't start." "Agatha, one candle is not a murder conviction." "I know that." Charles murmured progress. She ignored him. Livia suddenly spoke. The building was locked. Bill stood. "You have the key." "Yes." "Who else?" "No one." "That's unlikely." Livia's expression tightened. "I mean officially." Agatha filed away the word. "Officially." Bill asked to see the key. Livia opened her handbag, searched inside, then produced an old brass key. "There." Mrs. Bloxby, standing a little apart, watched her. "So the pump-house wasn't unused?" Agatha asked. Livia's voice became cool. "I said it was locked." "That isn't the same thing." "No." For the first time her composure slipped. Then it returned. Caleb rubbed his gloved hands together. "I told Clement not to use candles near that place. Floor's uneven, steps bad, door sticks." "So he knew the risks?" Bill asked. "I told him yesterday." "Did he say why he wanted to go inside?" Caleb hesitated. "Said something about atmosphere." Agatha almost laughed. Even dead, Clement Frost had managed to make atmosphere irritating. Bill turned back towards the candle. "There are footprints here, but the frost has been disturbed by too many people. We'll sort what we can." Agatha stared at the little red wick. Verity had hidden one. Now another lay beside a dead man. It was almost too neat. She looked towards the high black window of the pump-house. Clement had been collecting secrets all week. Now he had apparently carried one of them into the dark with him. And Agatha had the uncomfortable feeling that someone in Carsely had wanted the village to notice exactly where the candle had fallen. Chapter 5, kindly left out. By 10 the next morning, Carsely had decided 3 things. Clement Frost had been murdered. Verity Shaw was far too gentle to have done it. And Agatha Raisin was taking the whole matter rather personally. Agatha learned this in the village shop, while buying cigarettes, milk and a loaf she did not need. The shop was warm, overstocked, and crowded with people who had suddenly discovered urgent reasons to buy stamps. Mrs. Judd from Church Lane lowered her voice as Agatha entered. Nobody else did. "I only said," Mrs. Judd continued, "that poor Verity must be devastated." "Why Verity?" Agatha asked. 3 heads turned. Mrs. Judd blinked. "Well, Clement admired her window. Admiration isn't normally fatal." A silence followed. Then Nora Pargett, standing beside the Christmas cards, smiled with unbearable kindness. "You must be terribly shaken too, Agatha." "I'm not shaken." "After what Clement said about your display." Agatha stared at her. "What has my display got to do with his death?" "Nothing at all." Nora's tone made it sound like a great deal. Another woman murmured, "Of course not." Agatha understood. They had found a version of events they liked. Clement had mocked Agatha publicly. Agatha had disliked Clement publicly. Therefore, any interest she showed in his death could be explained as wounded pride. It was elegant, unfair, and thoroughly Carsely. "I suppose the Avent Trail is cancelled?" she asked. Nora tapped the edge of her clipboard. "We haven't decided." Tap. Agatha noticed. "We're having a small discussion this afternoon." "Where?" "The parish hall." "What time?" Nora hesitated. "Oh, Agatha, there's really no need for you to concern yourself." There it was. Not exclusion. Kindness. Much nastier. "I'm on the rotter." "Yes, but after everything that's happened, we thought you might prefer to step back." "We?" Nora's smile tightened. "The organisers." "I thought I was one of the organisers." "You're a participant." Agatha felt heat rise beneath her collar. The distinction was deliberate. Before she could answer, Mrs. Bloxby entered carrying a shopping bag, and immediately sensed the temperature. "Good morning." Everyone answered too brightly. Mrs. Bloxby looked from Nora to Agatha. "Have I missed something?" "No," said Nora. "Yes," said Agatha. Mrs. Bloxby waited. Agatha said, "Apparently I'm too emotionally fragile to attend a meeting about an event I'm taking part in." "I didn't say fragile," Nora protested. "No, you were much cleverer than that." A man near the bread shelf suddenly became fascinated by wholemeal rolls. Mrs. Bloxby said gently, "Perhaps everyone should be included if decisions affect the whole trail." Nora tapped the clipboard again. "We only wanted to spare Agatha discomfort." "I adore discomfort," said Agatha. "I'll be there." Nora left shortly afterwards. The shop breathed again. Mrs. Judd leaned towards the counter. "I did see something, actually." Agatha turned. "What?" "Verity carrying a tray yesterday afternoon." Mrs. Bloxby gave her a warning look. Mrs. Judd ignored it. It had a cloth over it. She was going towards the vicarage. "What kind of tray?" "How should I know? A tray. Before the window walk?" "About 5." Agatha thought of the red-wick candle she had seen hidden among Verity's greenery. "Did she come back?" "I didn't see." From beside the newspapers another voice said, "Maureen was taking candles out of windows yesterday. Maureen Vale herself stood there, holding a tin of cat food. I was removing unsafe ones," she said. Agatha turned. "From whose windows?" "Anyone daft enough to put flame near fabric." "Verity's?" Maureen's expression hardened. "Possibly. That means yes. It means I checked half the trail." "What did you do with the candles?" "Put them somewhere safe." "Where?" Maureen gave her a level look. "You do realize Bill Wong is investigating this?" "Yes." "Then perhaps let him." Agatha smiled. "No." Maureen sighed. "Parish Hall storage cupboard. There's a metal biscuit tin. Anything I removed went in there. That was useful." Mrs. Bloxby knew Agatha's face. "Agatha." "What?" "You're thinking very loudly." Outside, the air was sharp and clean. Frost still clung to the shaded side of the stone walls. Mrs. Bloxby walked with Agatha towards the church. "Try not to decide too quickly," she said. "I haven't decided anything." "You've decided Verity is interesting." "She is interesting." "You disliked her before Clement died." Agatha stopped. "That doesn't make me wrong." "No." Mrs. Bloxby smiled. "It merely makes it easier for you to be wrong." Agatha hated when Mrs. Bloxby said reasonable things. They reached the vicarage gate. Agatha lit a cigarette and looked towards Willow Cottage farther down the lane. A candle from Verity's display. A candle by Clement's body. A covered tray carried to the vicarage. It fitted beautifully. Perhaps too beautifully. But Agatha was angry. Excluded and still remembering Clement praising Verity's quiet taste, while treating her own window like a branch of Harrod's. Reason told her to wait. Her pride told her Verity Shaw was hiding something. For the moment, pride was speaking louder. Chapter 6. Hodge, Boswell, and Melted Wax. Agatha returned home from the parish hall meeting in a foul temper. The Advent trail would continue. This had been decided, Nora explained, because the village needed something positive. Agatha had then been asked whether she still wished to keep her 17th of December slot. The tone suggested that surrendering it would be dignified. She had kept it out of spite. Now the remains of her original display lay across the sitting room. Ribbon, silver branches, candle holders, artificial snow, and one collapsed cardboard star. Hodge sat on the sofa, washing a paw. Boswell had discovered the artificial snow. "Don't eat that." Boswell ignored her. Agatha kicked off her shoes, lit a cigarette, and stared at the candles she had removed from the window. Several were new. 2 had burned for almost an hour. One had melted badly down one side because she had placed it too near the velvet backdrop. She picked it up. Clement Frost had been found beside a red-wick beeswax stub. Verity had possessed one. Maureen had removed candles from several displays. And practically everyone in Carsely now behaved as though saying the word candle constituted detective work. Agatha turned the stub in her fingers. "What am I missing?" Hodge continued washing. Boswell jumped onto the table and knocked another candle onto the carpet. "Boswell!" Agatha snatched it up. A thin piece of wax had broken away near the top. Something dark showed inside it. She frowned. The wick beneath the wax was blackened, not merely at the exposed tip. Soot had worked down into the softened wax from an earlier burn. Agatha looked at the other candles. A fresh wick was pale and clean. A once-burned wick remained dark even after cooling. She relit one experimentally, watched the flame catch, then extinguished it. The difference was obvious once she was looking for it. The candle beside Clement had looked short and used. But what if its condition mattered? She reached for the telephone. Bill answered after several rings. "Wong, it's Agatha." I recognized the urgency. "I've realized something about the candle." There was a pause. "Go on. The wick. What about it? If a candle has already burned, soot gets into the wick and sometimes into the wax around it. You can tell it was previously used." "Yes." Agatha disliked the calmness of that answer. "You already knew. We sent the candle for examination." "Oh." "But continue." She hated him slightly less. "The one at the pump-house might not have been lit there for the first time. That is possible. It could have come from somebody's window. Also possible. Verity's." "Agatha!" "I said possible." "You meant Verity." Agatha paced towards the window. "What if someone took a used candle from a display and moved it to the pump-house? Then everyone would assume the owner of that candle had been there." Bill was quiet. That improved her mood. Finally he said, "That would require the person moving it to know where the candle had come from, and to know Clement was going to the pump-house." "Yes." Agatha looked down at the dismantled decorations. That narrowed things. Not enough. But it changed the shape of the problem. Bill, who knew Clement was planning whatever he was doing there, "We're working on that. You always say that." "Because we usually are." He hung up before she could extract anything else. Agatha returned to the table. Hodge had taken Boswell's place and was sniffing the beeswax suspiciously. Finally, she told him, "Someone in this house is taking the investigation seriously." The phone rang again. This time it was Charles. "Have you been arrested yet?" "No." "Disappointing. I've discovered something. Even more alarming." Agatha explained about the wick. Charles was silent for longer than usual. "So the candle could have been planted?" "Yes." "To point at someone?" "Yes. Presumably the pretty one." Agatha bristled. "Why presumably?" "Because you've been staring at Verity like a cat at a particularly offensive pigeon. I'm being objective. You disliked her before there was a corpse. That doesn't mean she isn't guilty. No, it just means you'll enjoy it more if she is." Agatha hung up on him. Unfortunately, the remark stayed. She poured herself tea and stood at the kitchen counter, while evening settled over the lane. Across Carsely, tonight's Advent window would soon be lit. People would walk past, admire what they were meant to admire, and politely ignore everything else they saw through the glass. Agatha looked at the blackened wick in her hand. A used candle could be moved. A story could be moved with it. And whoever had carried that red-wick stub to the pump-house might have been counting on everyone noticing the wrong window first. Chapter 7. The pretty window. The emergency meeting at the Red Lion began badly and improved only in the sense that nobody actually threw anything. Nora Pargett had arranged chairs in a semicircle and placed the donation tin on the mantelpiece, presumably to remind everyone that murder should not interfere with fundraising. "We need calm," she announced. Agatha immediately disliked the word. Verity sat near Mrs. Bloxby in a dark green coat, looking pale and composed. Piers Lovell leaned against the bar. Dennis Crowther had brought his camera, but unusually was not using it. Bill Wong stood near the fireplace. "We're still establishing Clement Frost's movements," he said, "so I'd appreciate it if nobody treated speculation as fact." Several villagers looked at Agatha. She noticed. Bill noticed her noticing. "Especially publicly," he added. Agatha folded her arms. Nora tapped her clipboard. "The immediate question is whether the Advent trail continues." "It should," Verity said quietly. "Clement wouldn't have wanted it stopped." Agatha looked at her. There it was again. Grace under pressure. Very effective. "What exactly were you doing with that candle tray yesterday?" Agatha asked. The room changed. Bill closed his eyes briefly. Verity stared at her. "I'm sorry. The tray you carried towards the vicarage." Mrs. Bloxby said, "Agatha, and the beeswax candle with the red wick in your window. The same kind found beside Clement." Nobody moved. Verity's face lost colour. "That candle wasn't mine. You hid it under greenery." "I did not hide it. I saw you cover it. I was arranging the display." Agatha heard herself becoming louder and knew she should stop. She did not. "You said you used white church candles." "I did. Then why was a red-wick beeswax candle in your tray?" Verity's mouth tightened. "Because Clement put it there." The answer stopped Agatha. "Only briefly." "When?" "The afternoon of the first walk." "He said it would improve the colour. And you removed it later." "Yes. Why?" Verity hesitated. Agatha saw the hesitation and pounced. "Because you knew he'd discovered your display wasn't original." A sharp silence fell. Piers looked interested. Nora looked horrified. Charles, seated at the back, muttered, "Oh dear." Verity stared at Agatha. "What are you talking about?" "Your simple arrangement. The dried oranges, greenery, white candles. Clement knew you copied it." A flush rose up Verity's neck. Not guilt, Agatha realized too late. Humiliation. Piers said, "Copied from where?" Verity looked at him with sudden fury. "A magazine. Happy." Nobody answered. She turned back to Agatha. "I saw the picture in November. I liked it. I copied it. It's a Christmas window, not the Sistine Chapel." A few people looked down. Agatha should have stopped then. Instead she said, "Clement threatened to expose you." Verity's eyes filled with tears. She did not cry dramatically. That was somehow worse. "He mocked me," she said. "He told me everyone liked me, because they thought I was naturally tasteful. He said it would be amusing to see what happened if they knew. So you had a motive." Mrs. Bloxby's voice became firmer. "Agatha." Bill stepped forward. "That's enough." Agatha looked around the room. She saw it happen. The shift. Not sympathy for Clement. Sympathy for Verity. And something colder aimed at Agatha. Mrs. Judd whispered something to Nora. Nora gave Agatha a look of gentle disappointment, which was practically unbearable. Verity stood. "For what it's worth, I didn't kill him." She picked up her handbag. "And I didn't take the candle to the pump-house." She left. The door closed quietly. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Maureen Vale said, "Well done." Agatha turned. "What?" "You've managed to make murder look like a disagreement over Christmas decorations." Piers looked down, apparently fascinated by his phone. Charles rose. "Perhaps we should all have another drink." "No," said Agatha. Bill waited until the others began talking again before approaching her. "You were right about one thing." Agatha straightened. "The candle?" Verity lied. "I knew it. Don't celebrate." His tone stopped her. She did carry the tray to the vicarage. Maureen removed the red-wick candle because it was too close to dried greenery. Agatha frowned. "When?" "Before 6. And Clement didn't leave the Red Lion for the pump-house until after 8:30. Agatha stared at him. So Verity didn't have the candle. "Not then. Who did?" "That's the useful question." Agatha's stomach sank. The accusation had been satisfying for approximately 40 seconds. Now it looked exactly like what everyone had assumed it was. Jealousy dressed as detection. Charles joined her outside 10 minutes later. Frost glittered on the pub sign. "You could apologize," he said. "I know. That sounded painful." It was. He pushed his hands into his coat pockets. For what it's worth, she was hiding something. Yes, a copied window, which is considerably less serious than murder. I know that too. They walked a few yards in silence. Agatha hated being wrong. She hated even more being wrong in public. But beneath the embarrassment, one fact remained. The red-wick candle had disappeared before Clement went to the pump-house. Someone else had taken it. Someone who knew where it had been removed from. Someone who knew exactly what story it would tell if it were found beside Clement Frost. Agatha looked back at the warm windows of the Red Lion. The village had wanted Verity to be innocent. Agatha had wanted her to be guilty. Neither preference mattered. The candle had moved before the murder. And now Agatha needed to stop looking at the prettiest suspect and start looking at the hands that controlled the trail. Chapter 8, Livia's locked room. Agatha apologized to Verity the next morning. Not beautifully. She telephoned, said, "I was wrong about the murder," and then ruined the effect by adding, "though you were behaving suspiciously." Verity replied, "Thank you, Agatha," in a tone suggesting that gratitude had limits. It was enough. Agatha then turned her attention to Livia Crane. The old pump-house stood at the edge of the churchyard wall, and Livia had admitted possessing the key. More importantly, Clement had specifically mentioned the building to her at the Red Lion. Charles agreed to accompany Agatha. "Why?" she asked suspiciously. "I'm curious." "You're bored." That too. Livia lived in a handsome stone cottage whose exterior promised considerably more money than the interior contained. Agatha noticed this immediately. The hall was cold. Only one radiator was on. Several rooms beyond had their doors shut, and Livia wore a cashmere scarf indoors. She received them with perfect politeness. "How lovely to see you both." Nobody believed this. Charles admired an old watercolour, while Agatha went directly to the point. "What were you keeping in the pump-house?" Livia's smile remained in place. "I beg your pardon." "Boxes, furniture, something Clement found." How imaginative. "You change the subject when you are uncomfortable." Livia looked at her. "Do I?" "Yes, usually by complimenting someone." A pause. Then Livia said, "That coat is an excellent colour on you." Charles coughed. Agatha almost smiled. "Thank you." "What's in the pump-house?" Livia's shoulders lowered. For the first time she looked tired rather than elegant. "My things." "What things?" "Things I cannot keep here." She led them into a small sitting-room, where the fire had been lit but barely warmed the space. "My husband left debts," she said. "Not enormous debts, just enough of them. The house costs more than I can comfortably manage, and I've sold several pieces of furniture." Charles's manner changed immediately. The teasing disappeared. Livia looked towards the window. "I store things in the pump-house until I decide what must go next. China 2 chairs, some paintings, boxes of books. And Clement discovered them," Agatha said. "Yes." "What did he threaten?" Livia laughed once without humour. "He didn't threaten. He sympathized." Agatha understood. Sometimes sympathy was worse. "He said my situation gave the trail emotional depth. He called it quiet decline." Charles muttered something impolite. Livia smiled faintly. "I believe he intended to put it in his essay." An anonymous widow in a beautiful village, surrounded by possessions she could no longer afford to keep. "That's vile," Agatha said. It was accurate. That was what made it vile. For a moment Agatha forgot the case. She imagined Carsely discussing Livia's finances in lowered voices, while insisting nobody was judging her. Then she remembered the key. "Did Clement ask to go inside the pump-house?" "Yes." "When?" "The afternoon before he died." "And you gave him the key?" "No." Livia hesitated. "I opened it for him." "What did he want?" "He had an idea." Agatha and Charles exchanged a look. "What kind of idea?" "A secret advent window." Livia sounded embarrassed even repeating it. "He said the ordinary trail had become predictable." He wanted to put a candle in the little pump-house window and reveal it unexpectedly after the walk. Agatha sat forward. He planned the candle. Yes, one candle only, very symbolic. Of course it was, Charles said. Livia continued. He wanted people to follow him there, after the closing drinks. He said darkness would make the reveal more effective. So why was he there alone? I don't know. Who else knew? Livia thought. Nora may have. Clement discussed timing with her, and I believe Piers overheard part of it. Agatha felt the case shift. Clement had not simply wandered to the pump-house. He had staged the scene in advance. A hidden window, a single candle, a dramatic reveal, the sort of thing he would enjoy immensely. Did he have a candle with him when you showed him the building? Agatha asked. No, he said he would choose one later. Charles walked to the window. So Clement created the setting. Yes, and somebody else chose the prop, Agatha said. Livia looked puzzled. Agatha stood. May we see the pump-house? A few minutes later they crossed the frosty path together. Livia unlocked the door. Inside were stacked boxes, an old chair, 2 framed pictures, and a narrow table beneath the high window. Nothing sinister, only reduced circumstances stored out of sight. Agatha examined the table. A faint ring of wax marked the wood beneath the window. Charles leaned over it. So a candle was meant to stand here? Yes, Livia said. Agatha stared at the mark. The candle found outside the door had not merely been dropped. It had belonged to Clement's little performance. But somebody had moved it or replaced it after learning what he intended. Her earlier theory collapsed completely. Livia had motive and access. But she did not explain why a candle taken from Verity's display had travelled through Maureen's hands and ended beside Clement. That required knowledge of the trail itself, not just the building. Outside, Livia locked the door again. Agatha looked towards the vicarage roof beyond the churchyard. Charles said, "You've got that expression." "What expression?" "The one that normally costs someone an afternoon." Agatha ignored him. Clement had designed a theatrical little story about hidden light. Someone had simply rewritten the ending. And whoever had done it knew far more about Carsely's candles than Livia Crane ever had. The caretaker's flame. The parish hall storage cupboard contained 3 folding tables, a broken nativity stable, 2 boxes of hymn sheets, and enough unused tinsel to decorate Birmingham. Maureen Vale stood in the doorway with her arms folded. "I've already told the police everything." "Excellent," said Agatha. "You can tell me faster." Maureen gave Mrs. Bloxby a weary look. "Does she ever stop?" "Not reliably," said Mrs. Bloxby. Agatha ignored them and pointed to a dented biscuit tin on the shelf. "That." Maureen took it down. Inside were candles of every description, white church candles, coloured tapers, 2 small votives, and several beeswax stubs. "I removed anything unsafe," she said. Curtains, dried greenery, paper stars. People lose their minds at Christmas. Agatha searched through the tin. No red wick. There was one. Agatha looked up. "You're sure?" "Quite. Beeswax. Funny red thread through the wick. What happened to it?" "No idea." "When did you notice it missing?" "After Clement died." Mrs. Bloxby moved closer. "Who knew you put removed candles here?" Maureen shrugged. "Anyone helping with the trail? Nora certainly, Clement, Caleb probably, and Verity. She knew I'd taken hers." Agatha frowned. "You took it directly from her window?" "Yes." She wasn't pleased. "Why did she carry the tray to the vicarage?" "To complain." That punctured another small theory. Maureen continued. "Clement had put the beeswax candle in her arrangement. Verity wanted it back because he'd made such a fuss about using it. I told her she could have it after the greenery was removed, but it stayed here. For a while." Agatha looked around the cramped cupboard. Anyone could have slipped in during the parish hall preparations. That was the trouble with village events. Everyone had access to everything, and nobody admitted to being in charge until praise was distributed. Mrs. Bloxby picked up the biscuit tin lid. "Nora organised the volunteers, didn't she?" "Yes," Maureen said. "Rotas, keys, supplies, all of it." Agatha went still. Rotas. Supplies. Dates. Who used which window? Who handled which candle? Who was where and when? Nora did not merely organise the event. Nora knew its anatomy. They found her at the vicarage half an hour later, sorting donation envelopes beside a stack of greenery. Nora looked up. "Oh, Agatha, Mrs. Bloxby." Tap. Her finger touched the clipboard. Agatha noticed. Busy? Trying to keep things running. Were these envelopes collected on the night Clement died? Nora's fingers stopped. Some were. Agatha glanced at the stack. Most were still sealed and arranged exactly as they had been days before. "You told Bill you were collecting donations at the parish hall." "I was." "For how long?" Nora's expression changed by a fraction. "I don't remember precisely." Tap, tap, Mrs. Bloxby said mildly. "You usually remember schedules very well." Nora smiled. It was a confused evening. Agatha looked at the candle boxes on the table. "Did you know Maureen removed Verity's red-wick candle?" "I may have." "Did you know Clement planned the secret display at the pump house?" Nora's hand tightened around the clipboard. "He mentioned all sorts of ideas. That one specifically. I don't recall." Tap. There it was again. Agatha felt the pieces begin to align. Clement had known Nora rigged the rota. He had known prime dates went to friends and generous donors. And Clement enjoyed turning private weaknesses into public observations. What was he going to say in his closing speech? Agatha asked. Nora's face hardened. "I don't know. Really, really," Mrs. Bloxby said quietly. "He told Alf he intended to make a joke about how surprisingly unrandom the random rota had been. For once Nora did not tap the clipboard. Her face went pale. Agatha watched her carefully. "You knew?" Nora pushed back her chair. "This is absurd." "Was it?" "The dates meant nothing. They meant a great deal to you." "That is ridiculous." "You rewarded donors." "I tried to keep people happy." "You rewarded friends." "I balanced requests." "And Clement was going to make everyone laugh at you for it." Nora stood. "You have no idea what organising this village is like. Everyone wants the best date, the largest mention, the nicest photograph, then insists they're doing it for charity." Agatha almost admired the accuracy. "Almost. So Clement threatened your reputation." "He threatened everyone's." That answer interested Agatha. Not denial. Expansion. Nora gathered her papers. "I have work to do." She walked out. Agatha watched her go. Mrs. Bloxby remained silent until the front door closed. She sounded angry. She sounded frightened. Agatha examined the supply table. One box contained the same beeswax candles Clement had admired at the first meeting. Beside it lay the rota. Names. Dates. Locations. Small penciled notes beside several entries. Electrical check. Greenery. Donation. Candles removed. Nora had known everything. But knowledge alone was not proof. Agatha needed one more thing. She picked up the rota. Next to Verity's name, in Nora's neat handwriting, was a tiny note. "Emv removed red candle halt in." Agatha stared at it. Mrs. Bloxby leaned over her shoulder. "Oh, yes." Nora had not merely known that a red-wick candle existed. She had written down exactly where it had gone. And only hours later that same candle had appeared at Clement Frost's carefully staged pump-house window. Agatha felt the familiar surge of excitement, immediately followed by caution. She had already humiliated herself once. This time she would not accuse anyone until the whole path of the candle made sense. But when she looked at Nora's abandoned clipboard, she no longer saw village administration. She saw opportunity arranged into neat little boxes. Chapter 10. The last window. The parish hall smelled of mince pies, wet wool, and strained goodwill. Nora had insisted on a final gathering to announce the charity total and formally close the Advent trail. Agatha suspected she had hoped routine would smother suspicion. Instead, half Carsely had arrived. Dennis stood near the notice board with his camera. Piers hovered beside the drinks table. Caleb occupied a chair near the radiator. Maureen guarded the kitchen hatch as though personally responsible for preventing another murder. Verity sat beside Mrs. Bloxby. Agatha crossed the room towards her. Several conversations slowed. "Good," thought Agatha, bitterly. If she was going to eat humble pie, she might as well do it before an audience. Verity. Verity looked up. Agatha took a breath. I owe you a proper apology. Silence spread efficiently. I was jealous of the attention you were getting. Clement irritated me, and I let both things affect my judgment. You lied about the window, but that did not make you a murderer. Verity studied her. Then a small smile appeared. That must have hurt, excruciatingly. Charles, behind them, said, "We considered calling an ambulance." Agatha ignored him. Verity said, "Apology accepted." Mrs. Bloxby gave Agatha a quiet, approving glance. It was annoyingly pleasant. Nora appeared at the front of the room. "If we might begin." She held the clipboard. Agatha noticed her thumb resting against its edge. "Before we announce the total," Nora continued, "I think we should remember what this event was meant to represent. Community, generosity, light in dark places." "Very pretty," said Agatha. Nora stopped. Every head turned. Bill Wong stood near the rear door. He had arrived 10 minutes earlier and said almost nothing. Agatha took that as permission, or at least not prohibition. "There's been rather too much talk about what things were meant to represent," she said. Clement was particularly fond of symbols. Nora's face tightened. He wanted a secret final Advent window at the old pump-house. One candle in the darkness, a surprise reveal after the walk. A murmur moved through the room. Agatha continued. Clement created the scene himself, but someone else altered it. She picked up a small evidence photograph Bill had allowed her to refer to, showing the candle found beside the pump-house. The candle had a twisted red wick. We first saw one like it at the vicarage. Clement later put one into Verity's display. Verity nodded reluctantly. Maureen removed it because it was unsafe beside dried greenery. Maureen folded her arms. "And put it in the parish hall tin." "Yes." Agatha looked around. That matters because the candle beside Clement was not some random candle from the pump-house. It had already been used in the Advent trail. Caleb leaned forward. "So somebody planted it." "Exactly," Piers said, "to make Verity look guilty. Eventually. Yes. But more importantly, to create confusion around Clement's own little performance." Nora gave a short laugh. "This is speculation." Her finger tapped the clipboard. "Once." Agatha looked directly at her. "No, this part is organisation." That drew an uncertain laugh from the room. Nora did not join in. Agatha walked to the table where the old rotter had been placed beside the donation figures. "Clement knew you had manipulated the display dates." Nora's mouth thinned. "We've been through this. You gave favoured dates to friends and donors, while calling the rota random. I tried to accommodate people, and Clement was going to mention it publicly. He liked embarrassing everyone." "That's true." Agatha allowed the point to settle. He found Verity's copied display amusing. He thought Livia's private financial trouble was local colour. He wanted Dennis's photographs. He mocked Caleb's safety concerns and Maureen's work. He collected everyone's vulnerabilities, because he thought turning them into observations made him clever. There was no affection for Clement in the room. That, Agatha thought, was precisely why the truth had been so difficult. Everyone had possessed a reason to hate him. But only one person knew all three things that mattered, she said. Nora stopped tapping. "You knew Clement planned to use the pump-house." Agatha raised one finger. "You knew Maureen had removed Verity's red-wick candle, a second, and you knew exactly where that candle had been stored." She unfolded a photocopy of the rota notes. "Because you wrote it down." Maureen stared at Nora. Beside Verity Shaw's entry was the neat pencilled note, "M.V. removed candle hall tin." Nora looked at Bill. "This proves nothing." "On its own," Bill said calmly, "no." Agatha continued. "But your alibi does not work either. You said you were collecting donation envelopes at the parish hall. Most of them were still untouched afterwards." Nora's voice sharpened. "I was in and out. For 12 minutes?" That came from Piers. Agatha looked at him. Piers raised his hands. "I checked the posting times. Mine too, actually. Clement disappeared shortly after 8:30. Nora wasn't in the hall then." Nora stared at him with dislike. Dennis suddenly spoke. "I have a photograph." Everyone turned. Dennis looked uncomfortable. I deleted several pictures because Clement had been pestering me about using them. But Bill recovered the card. Bill nodded once. Dennis continued. One photograph catches the lane by the churchyard. It's poor quality. But Nora is in the background. Nora went completely still. Agatha felt no triumph now, only a sad inevitability. You knew Clement was going early to prepare his surprise, she said. You took the candle from Maureen's tin and brought it with you. Nora's face had lost its colour. Agatha lowered her voice. You met him at the pump-house. Perhaps you meant only to stop him. Perhaps you wanted his notebook, or wanted him to promise not to humiliate you. Nora said nothing. The argument moved on to the bad step Caleb had warned him about. Clement fell. And then you saw the candle. Bill watched Nora carefully. You realised his secret display could become cuffer, Agatha said. So you left the used candle where it would be found. A candle associated with Verity. Clement had created the theatrical story. You simply exploited it. Nora's composure finally cracked. You think this was about a Christmas rota? No, said Agatha. That answer came easily. It was about being laughed at. The room remained silent. Nora stared at the clipboard in her hand. He was going to stand there, she said finally, smiling while everyone discovered I'd fixed the dates. As if I were some ridiculous little dictator. Her voice shook. Do you know what these people are like? Several villagers looked offended. Nora laughed bitterly. Yes, exactly. She looked around the hall. They complain if they're early in the month. They complain if they're late. They want praise for donating £10 and anonymity for donating 100. They tell me it's only charity, and then telephone 3 times about whether their window is mentioned in the programme. Agatha could not argue with much of this. But Clement was going to make you the joke, she said. Nora nodded. I went to make him stop, and when he wouldn't, Nora looked towards the floor. He stepped backwards. Bill moved forward. That was enough. The rest belonged to the police. Later, when Nora had gone with Bill and the room had broken into stunned little groups, Charles handed Agatha a mince pie. You apologised and solved a murder in the same evening. Don't expect either regularly. Verity approached. For what it's worth, I liked your window. Agatha narrowed her eyes. You're not being kind. No, it was completely excessive. Agatha smiled. Thank you. Outside, Carsely glowed beneath a thin crust of frost. The Advent trail was finished, but several windows remained lit, not for judging, not for prizes. Simply because it was December, and people liked the light. Carsely completed its Advent season, though the following year the display dates were drawn publicly from a biscuit tin. Several villagers claimed they had always preferred the idea. Nobody believed them. The little candle with the twisted red wick had been meant to glow prettily behind glass. Instead it marked every hand that moved it, and every attempt to make vanity look like virtue. Light is a lovely symbol. But people can make even kindness competitive when they start deciding who deserves to shine. That evening Agatha lit one plain candle at home, safely away from velvet greenery and artificial snow. Hodge and Boswell ignored its symbolism entirely, probably wisely. Would you have followed the candle towards Verity, or wondered sooner who controlled the rota? Thank you for spending another winter evening with me here at Cotswold Cozy Mysteries. Do tell me in the comments which clue first made you suspicious, and whether Agatha's accusation of Verity fooled you. Carsely will settle down again, of course, at least until the next invitation. Committee decision, or supposedly harmless village tradition, gives Agatha Raisin something new to interfere with, and when the last candle gutters out, there is always another window waiting to tell the wrong story.